At the age of 19, a young woman vanished from her home under rather mysterious circumstances, leaving her car abandoned in the middle of a bridge. Police efforts to locate her were fruitless, leading the investigation to a dead end until an unexpected and shocking turn of events shed light on the truth, deeply shaking the investigators. Sarah Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune, a small town in New Jersey, USA. From her childhood, she exhibited a passion for the arts, finding joy in painting, and was an active athlete, participating in school swimming and softball teams. Tragedy struck Sarah's family when she was 16, as her mother passed away from cancer, leaving her to live with her father and their beloved dog, Buddy. After graduating high school, Sarah chose to pursue her interest in the arts by enrolling in a local college, majoring in art and television production. As she delved deeper into her studies, she seriously considered the idea of moving to Canada after completing her education. In late 2016, as Sarah turned 19, her father had to leave town for a couple of days, leaving her alone at their home. She planned to enjoy her friends' company and relax over the upcoming weekend. However, the forthcoming events would radically alter her plans. Around 2:30 a.m. on December 3rd, a taxi driver called 911, reporting that he had seen an unattended car parked on the bridge's shoulder, which he found suspicious and decided to alert the police. A patrol officer was dispatched and found the car's doors unlocked with the keys left in the ignition. After running the plates, it was revealed the car belonged to 86-year-old Lily Stern. The police immediately went to her house, but the elderly woman explained that her granddaughter, Sarah, used the car. Trying to reach her, Lily found that Sarah was not responding to calls. The police went to Sarah's house, only to find her missing. Based on limited information, the police developed an alarming hypothesis. Sarah might have intentionally driven to the bridge to leave her car and jump into the water. However, the investigation continued with other possible explanations being considered. The police pondered recreating the sequence of events leading up to the disappearance, trying to figure out what Sarah had been doing. They considered the possibility that she might have stayed overnight with acquaintances, hence began checking her social circle. Information was received that Sarah spent most of her time with her devoted friend Liam. Detectives visited his residence in the morning. Liam confirmed that after leaving their morning meeting, he had not seen Sarah since he had gone to his evening job, and there had been no contact since. The police questioned him about any problems or challenges Sarah might have had, to which Liam provided significant information. Being her childhood friend, he was aware of her trials. Her mother's death had profoundly affected her, plunging her into a state of despondency or even depression. He didn't dismiss the possibility of her drastic action. Liam also mentioned her ambitions to move to Canada, considering her recent social media posts about an impending relocation, which suggested that Sarah might have left to escape all her troubles, cutting ties with her family and friends. Immediately after speaking with Liam, the police gathered additional information by conversing with a woman living next door to Sarah. It turned out that on the crucial day, Sarah had appeared at her door with an unusual request. She handed the neighbor a box filled with items belonging to her deceased mother, asking her to temporarily keep them. Owing to her friendship with Sarah's mother, the neighbor accepted the request without further questions. The woman's daughter also shared with the officers that she had planned a meeting with Sarah that evening, but Sarah never showed up. These actions raised the investigators' suspicions, especially considering her unexplained disappearance. Transferring her mother's personal belongings seemed like preparation for a flight or an even more tragic outcome. While one group of detectives explored the possibility that Sarah might have left town, another group organized a search operation. They determined that it was necessary to search the river under the bridge where her car was found for any sign of her body. However, they encountered a problem. The river's swift current could have carried the body many kilometers from where she presumably fell into the water around 2 in the morning. Despite these difficulties, professional divers were engaged, and volunteers were recruited to thoroughly search both banks and the adjacent areas. During this critical time, Sarah's father, being far from home, hurried back to the city to participate in the search. He appealed to the media to assist in spreading information about Sarah's disappearance and aid in her search. emphasizing the importance of any information that could shed light on the circumstances of her disappearance. Later that day, the investigators revisited Liam, aiming to gain a more accurate understanding of the events on the day Sarah disappeared and to identify any indications of her possible intentions. Liam recounted that they spent most of the day at her house, playing video games, and only left once, after Sarah had taken her mother's items to the neighbor. Following that, they visited a local Taco Bell before returning to Sarah's house. When asked about her emotional state, Liam candidly disclosed that Sarah had been experiencing profound emotional turmoil after her mother's death and had even once attempted suicide, but fortunately survived. He also mentioned that one factor contributing to her depression was her strained relationship with her father, who, according to her, had used some of the money left by her mother without her consent. This intensified her desire to leave for Canada as soon as possible. The detectives also reached out to the neighbors, and at one of the houses, they found a security camera that covered Sarah's house. Reviewing the footage, they confirmed Liam's account. It showed them leaving the house and coming back. The footage also showed that around 5 p.m., Liam left for work, and at 11:45 p.m., Sarah's grandmother's car was seen leaving the garage, presumably driven by Sarah herself. A few hours later, when the police arrived at her home, Sarah was already gone, and she had not been seen on camera since noon. All the gathered facts led the investigators to the somber supposition that Sarah might indeed have jumped from the bridge. While the divers continued their unsuccessful search in the river waters, finding neither Sarah nor her personal belongings, the police did not cease interrogating her circle of acquaintances. They summoned Preston to the station, who lived in the same building as Liam and was also Sarah's classmate and friend, having even accompanied her to the prom night. Preston confirmed that Sarah was experiencing psychological difficulties and had conflicts with her father. Hence, he did not rule out the possibility of her radical actions or escape to Canada. At the end of the meeting, visibly distressed, Preston broke down in tears and was then released by the detectives. The investigators proceeded with the investigation, inspecting Sarah's room where they found her personal documents and Canadian currency, intensifying suspicions of her possible flight. However, the documents left at home suggested otherwise. Recalling Liam's mention of a significant sum left by her mother, the police discovered Sarah's bank safe containing $25,000, untouched since her disappearance, casting doubt on her flight plans. Further investigation led them to the bank Sarah visited on December 2nd, the day of her disappearance. Reviewing the surveillance footage, they observed her brief presence in the bank but were unable to ascertain the purpose of the visit. This prompted the police to question Liam again, demanding an explanation for omitting Sarah's bank visit that day. The young man confirmed that they had gone to the bank together, adding that he had mentioned this in a conversation with other officers. Liam also recalled, unaware of why she wanted to enter, but noted her habit of regularly withdrawing funds from her bank account. He described how Sarah came into possession of those finances, which occurred just a few months before her disappearance, when she and Liam visited a residence owned by her late mother to inspect some items. There, Sarah stumbled upon a shoebox filled with banknotes, saved by her mother over her lifetime, and assembled into this box to leave for Sarah, who found them only 3 years later. All the bills were old, so she decided to deposit most of them in the bank and spend the rest at her discretion. The investigators deduced that Sarah was unlikely to have left the country without these funds, especially without her documents, almost entirely dismissing the possibility of her moving to Canada. The alternative scenario, suggesting she might have jumped into the river, also became increasingly unlikely. Detectives spoke with other friends and acquaintances of Sarah, all of whom insisted she was a very cheerful person, showing no signs of despondency or destructive behavior. On the contrary, some friends emphasized that after her mother's passing, Sarah became even more appreciative of life. Her father refuted any issues in their relationship, asserting he never took any money from her and noticed nothing in her behavior that could indicate depression. In addition to the circumstances, the efforts to find the young woman day after day were unsuccessful. The rescue divers were unable to locate either her or her personal belongings. The investigators considered the possibility that she might have been swept out to sea, where the chances of finding her would be minimal. This situation lasted for over a month, while her family and friends maintained hope of finding Sarah alive. However, 5 weeks after her disappearance, an unexpected twist occurred. A young man named Anthony, who was Sarah's former classmate and a close friend of Liam's, approached the detectives. He was passionate about filmmaking, especially horror films. Liam, who also had a keen interest in this genre, regularly shared with Anthony script ideas that he could potentially turn into reality. A few weeks before Sarah's disappearance, Liam shared a story with him about a guy who strangled his girlfriend and threw her body off a bridge. At the time, Anthony didn't think much of it, as his friend often came up with such ideas, and this seemed to him just another one in their series. After Sarah's disappearance, he hadn't even heard about the incident. They weren't close friends in school, and they hardly communicated after its conclusion. Nevertheless, Liam's behavior began to seem odd. He repeatedly reached out to Anthony, inquiring whether the police had contacted him. Initially, Anthony couldn't understand how this was related to him, but when he learned about Sarah's disappearance at the bridge, he recalled the story his friend had told. At that moment, it dawned on him, and he decided to go to the police to share this information. Following this, the detectives realized that the investigation was likely linked to a murder. However, they faced several serious challenges. Firstly, Sarah's body had not been found, and secondly, even if Liam was indeed guilty, there were no concrete pieces of evidence to charge him. The investigators then began to devise a plan and asked Anthony for help. Their only hope to uncover the truth was to obtain a confession, so they proposed that Anthony try to coax his friend into confessing. Initially, they decided to try this over the phone. In the presence of the police, Anthony called Liam on speakerphone and concocted a story about his camera breaking down and urgently needing money. He asked his friend if he could lend him a substantial sum. The detectives crafted this scenario, assuming that Liam might have had financial motives for the murder, aiming to acquire Sarah's money. However, Liam immediately suggested that they meet in person to discuss the details. The police realized that Liam was wary of being wiretapped, so they had to develop a new strategy. They instructed Anthony to go to the meeting with his friend and continue playing along, claiming his camera was broken, and also try to ascertain his views on Sarah. Detectives quickly installed a hidden camera in his car, and Anthony headed to the agreed-upon location. He parked, and soon Liam got into the car with him. To Anthony's surprise, Liam immediately began searching for bugs, asserting that the FBI was monitoring him. Hence, he needed to be sure their conversation wasn't being overheard. He inspected the area around his seat and patted down Anthony's clothing, but didn't find the hidden camera. He then apologized to his friend and mentioned he needed to be cautious. Anthony played along and asked what was going on. In response, Liam began to share his story, shocking not only his friend but also the detectives listening in. He confessed that everything had been planned by him several months ago. Liam knew the police would question him, so his primary aim was to deflect suspicion away from himself. Following this, Liam immediately noted that the worst part of the entire situation was his expectation of acquiring far more money. He had hoped to find about $100,000, or at least half of that amount, at Sarah's home. However, the 2 safes he had taken contained only $10,000. Liam also complained that the bills were severely worn, and he feared using them as the police might recognize them. Anthony continued playing along and asked where he kept the money. Liam responded that he initially kept the money at his place but then decided to hide it, as he had lost trust in Preston. Anthony immediately inquired about Preston's involvement. Liam explained that he had assisted in the matter and added that a few hours ago they had attempted to rob a local jewelry dealer and had broken into his house, only to find out that the man had recently moved away. Liam then disclosed that they had dumped Sarah's body off the bridge and it had yet to surface. Anthony hardly asked any questions, but Liam continued to elaborate. He then proceeded to describe the events of that day. Liam recounted that Sarah had gone to the bank and withdrawn some money. After returning home, they counted the bills, and at that moment, Liam approached her from behind and began to strangle her. He mentioned being worried about her dog's reaction, but the pet just watched, not barking. He had hoped the murder would take only a few minutes, but Sarah kept breathing. Then he took her shirt and stuffed it in her mouth. He also mentioned that he had set a timer on his phone, and the entire process took nearly half an hour. After the murder, he dragged the body to the bathroom and went to work to create an alibi. En route, he discovered he had lost his phone and realized he had likely dropped it at Sarah's house. Liam also mentioned that Preston got involved while he was at work, dragging the body from the bathroom to the bushes. Fearing his phone might be found in the house, he left work several times briefly and went searching for it, communicating with his friend using walkie-talkies they had purchased beforehand. Eventually, he managed to find the smartphone on the lawn in front of Sarah's house. At night, when his shift ended, he returned to Sarah's house. Knowing about the neighbor's camera, he always stayed in its blind spot to avoid detection. Liam placed his friend's body in the front seat of her car to drive it to the bridge where Preston was supposed to meet him. Waiting for the moment when the road would be clear of other cars, Liam set about extracting the body. However, he soon realized he had greatly overestimated his physical abilities. Although Sarah was light, he found it very difficult to move her. As soon as he managed to get her out of the car at the passenger seat near the bridge, 3 cars unexpectedly approached. Liam hastily tried to put her back, but at that critical moment, he twisted his ankle. He was consumed with fear that the passing drivers might notice him. Nonetheless, he managed to place the body back in the car just seconds before the cars drove by. Preston arrived at the bridge just in time to help Liam dispose of Sarah's body into the water. After the deed was done, Liam confessed that he had shared this secret not only with one person. He also expressed dissatisfaction with earning less money than he had anticipated, but claimed that this amount would suffice for him to live luxuriously and have parties with friends for some time. Liam expressed hope that the saga with Sarah was now completely finished and that the police would never be able to find him. After hearing his story, Anthony stated it was time for him to go home. They said their goodbyes, and Liam got out of his car. With the recorded confession in hand, the detectives immediately proceeded to Preston, bringing him in for interrogation. As soon as the young man learned about Liam's incriminating statements, he promptly corroborated the story described by his friend and confessed to their joint act of disposing of Sarah's body in the river. He then detailed the planning and execution of the crime alongside Liam, subsequently agreeing to lead the investigators to Sarah's house, showing them where the body was found and how he camouflaged it among the bushes. The young man also guided them to a wooded area where Sarah's safe was hidden, which contained her money that the police subsequently discovered. With the confessions and evidence at hand, law enforcement arrested both youths. Upon Liam's arrival at the police station and the inspection of his belongings, a key to Sarah's safe was found among his keys. During interrogation, Liam insisted that his confession to the murder was mistaken, suggesting the entire scenario was a casting for a horror movie that Anthony was supposedly filming, and he had hoped to get a role. However, this did not affect the course of the investigation, and the case was forwarded to court. Preston, having agreed to a plea deal with the prosecution and to testify against Liam, was charged with concealing the crime and disposing of the body, eventually leading to his sentence of 18 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years, considering he did not partake in the actual murder. As for Liam, he steadfastly maintained his claim of innocence. His defense focused on Sarah's body never being found, arguing that without it, her death could not be confirmed, and continued to push the narrative that Liam was involved in a casting for a horror film. Despite these arguments, they failed to convince the jury of his innocence. Consequently, Liam was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10-year prison term. After the sentencing, his mother continued to assert her son's innocence, actively giving interviews and maintaining the theory that Sarah simply ran away from home and would owe Liam an apology upon her return. Sarah's father, deprived of the chance to bury his daughter, found another way to honor her memory by establishing a scholarship in Sarah's name for students passionate about art.